episode of the series. I believe this is episode 6. Today I'm very excited. We have a very special guest. Her name is Trish. She is the head of the Well Arms Women nonprofit. She is one of the head members of the Well Arms Women's Club, and I want to let her kind of introduce herself a little bit and talk about who she is and what exactly that means and what she does here in Omaha.
Hi everybody. So I'm really proud to be a member of the Well Armed Woman. I founded the chapter here in Omaha. Our organization exists to equip, empower, and educate women in firearms safety and firearms handling and marksmanship. We create an environment that is welcoming and comfortable and allows women to really let their guard down and feel comfortable in their learning journey. We are really excited. We're almost at 100 members. And so the last few months we've seen a tremendous amount of growth as women are entering into the self-defense arena, and we're really excited about having this opportunity to talk to you today.
Yes. So what kind of started the Well Arms Women's Club? Where did it start? How long has it been going on?
Awesome. Yeah. So our organization was founded by a woman named Carrie Lightfoot. Standard, typical, average lady who had some experiences in her life where self-defense became important for her. And as she began her journey trying to learn and be educated, she just didn't find anything with an orientation towards women. The firearms industry was traditionally like a male-dominated place. Tons of information and resources, but nothing specific to women. And so she took it upon herself to change that. And she created her own business called the Well Armed Woman, and geared all of her gear and information to the questions that women have about firearms and holsters and gear and equipment and clothing. And she's done a great job. And from that came the idea to create a nonprofit to make it even easier for women to be welcomed into our community. And so she created the Well Armed Women Shooting Chapters. It's a 501c3. 2012 is about when she started it. And it has had explosive growth. When we look at how it's grown, there are hundreds of chapters across the United States, almost 10,000 members, and it's continuing to grow.
Cool. So how long have you guys been, how long has this been established?
Here in Omaha?
Yes.
So we were excited to have the opportunity to start in 2016.
Okay.
Myself and another lady named Kathy decided in the same way that Carrie did, hey, let's try this and see what we can do. At that time, there wasn't a lot of information here in the Omaha area for women as well. And we were really lucky. We got some media to come out to our open house. And we held that at Cabela's. And it was during a thunderstorm and a tornado warning. And 80 women showed up.
Wow.
To just learn about what we were about and what we could offer. And since then, it's been just an incredible 4 years. Wow.
So what role do you play in all this? You specifically, why do you feel like it's important for women to be armed and to know about guns? Why do you play such a significant role in this? Where did you come out?
So my journey began when I was widowed. I was 37 years old. I had a 7-year-old daughter, an 11-year-old son, and after my husband passed, I had a small incident in the home where I was woken up in the middle of the night thinking that we had an intruder. And all I had available to me was a bat that my son played with. So I take his bat, and I go through my home trying to protect us. And the whole time I'm looking at this bat going, this is not enough, right? What am I going to do with this bat? I stayed up the rest of the night, couldn't sleep, and that next morning I decided I needed to do something better for myself and my family. And I had shot guns before years back, way in the military. So it wasn't like I was unfamiliar, but I thought, that's probably a good idea. Let me go get some tools and some training and change this feeling that I have from being a possible victim to someone who could be their first responder and self-protector.
Right, and I think it's so important because now always it's been women. We don't have a lot of protection. We are the underdogs. We are, unfortunately taken advantage of. What would you say to people who are against guns? Who, what would you say to those kind of people who are against them and feel like they shouldn't be around and they're just, what would you say?
I can absolutely understand the sentiment, right? I understand the emotional part about firearms in relation to the idea that firearms are a cause of violence, or they are an inspiration for violence. Having kind of been gun neutral for so long, it wasn't like I was this big Second Amendment or gun enthusiast. And I understand from the perspective of, wouldn't it be nice that we would live in a peaceful world where we didn't need law enforcement, we didn't need any tools for self-defense, and that we all would live in peace? That would be fantastic. That is not our human history. Our human history is rife with individuals who choose violence and use whatever tools are available in that particular time or society to empower themselves to be even more effective in violence or crime. And the only way to counter that is to be yourself ready to be your first responder and to be a defender. And I think that's the critical difference, is we're coming to firearms from the perspective of defense, not offense. I'm not here to go out and harm anyone. I'm simply wanting to have a tool available to me if, God forbid, the worst thing happens. And so I liken it to, nobody wants a fire in your kitchen, but wouldn't it be nice to have a fire extinguisher in the house in the event there's a fire? And so I think that those who are against guns, if they took the gun out of the argument and simply wanted to work with those of us who are pro-gun towards ending violence, towards providing opportunity for people so they have different choices to make, we probably would get a lot more work done than we are right now.
Right. So what has been the difference before you were registered and before you had your first firearm? How do you feel now versus how you felt before? What kind of differences have you noticed?
It is really a transformation. Anytime that you embark on learning, doors open and more information becomes available, and understanding how I as a human and I as a woman can put forth an attitude, if you will, an aura of not me. So I'm wearing my not me shirt today. There's so much more about becoming part of the firearms community than just the firearms. So I've had the opportunity through the Well Armed Woman and other training organizations to learn, why does a violent criminal actor choose you versus someone else? How can you put forth I'm not going to be a victim, so that they go, you know what, that person's not worth messing with. And it's some of the simplest things of standing with authority, walking with purpose, scanning, making eye contact, smiling, saying, I see you. You're not going to sneak up on me. I know who you are. And moving on.
Right.
And that sense of empowerment has allowed me to do more with my family, going out on adventures. I'm not uncomfortable going into unknown places with unknown people. I can make connections with them and feel comfortable knowing that I'm going to be okay no matter where I'm at.
And I think that the biggest thing for me is, since I've worked with you and since I've took your class and been able to do those things, like you said, you touched on education. It's the fact, I think, of knowing that, okay, I know about my rights, I know about how to use what I have, I know where it's stored, I know how to walk, because in the Well Armed Women class, and we'll get into the different classes and stuff that you can take to get educated, but you also talked a lot about just knowing your surroundings, so I think that education is the most important part. I think a lot of people think that when you go and get a gun, it's like, okay, I have a gun, I got a gun, it's not like that. When you take these classes and as you come to the courses, people should understand that they're teaching you more than just about the gun itself. They're teaching you more than about those things. It's all about how to be safe, how to know your surroundings, keeping your head on a swivel, and all those kind of things. So I think it's very important about, your work and what you do. So say I'm a person who has never owned a gun, don't know anything about a gun, what would you say the first steps to getting one would be?
So what I would recommend, generally speaking, unless you're in a really far remote space, there's typically a gun club or a gun store or even a major place like the Cabela's and the Shields and what have you. And you'd be surprised at just how interested current firearm owners are in helping you in your journey and simply just asking for help. The biggest thing that I would say is to start slow, right? Don't jump into it. There's so much that those of us who've been in the community wish we did not do. Go out and just buy the first gun that you think feels good in your hand. Buying some cartridges and going and learning to shoot on your own. I have made so many corrections to my own skill set, having taken advantage of training where had I learned to shoot that way in the beginning, it would have been a lot easier. There are obviously organizations like the Well Armed Woman, but typically training is key. So taking a basic pistol or basic rifle, an intro to handguns, finding people actually at the range itself who you can watch and admire their shooting if they seem to shoot really well. That's a great resource. And you'd be surprised at how honored they are when you say, hey, how did you learn how to shoot like that?
Right.
You might get your first free class just from them.
Where would someone go and find some classes like this? Is it something they can look on Facebook? Should they just go pop into Google? Where can someone find these different courses and classes like that?
Yeah, so there are obviously different educational organizations. So there's the NRA training organization, which is separate from the political side. So the NRA is primarily a training organization. They have a lobbying branch that's separate. So you can go to the NRA, you can go to the United States Concealed Carry Training Association, so the uscca.com. Google isn't bad, but make sure that you vet your instructor. So in the same way, when you're thinking about, I'm going to learn how to use a tool that could save my life, right? Imagine you needed heart surgery. Wouldn't you want to investigate the surgeon and the team and how successful they are in repairing whatever it is that you needed to repair? So if we're going to invest that much time in picking our heart surgeon, you want to spend that much time finding the right instructor for you, seeing if they have ratings or reviews online, asking other firearms folks that you're around where they might have gotten training. We don't really have like a Yelp for firearms training, but that would be a great idea.
Hey, you never know.
Yeah.
So you took some courses, you feel confident enough. How does a person get their license? And let's talk about the different kind of licenses that you can obtain for guns.
Okay, so for the purposes of purchasing a handgun, in the state of Nebraska, we have a requirement for what is called a purchase permit. It's simply a certificate that states that you have had a successful background check, that you are not a prohibited person, you have no criminal record, and no other prohibiting factors that keep you from owning a firearm. Typically, in the past, you would just go to your sheriff's office and fill out an application, and they would do the background check and they'll mail it. Due to COVID right now, most of them are asking you to do it by mail, so you need that application notarized and you'd send it in. So that allows you to buy one. At the same time, if concealed carry is an ultimate goal, then what I would suggest is going and renting firearms at any of the ranges. In the state of Nebraska, our actual unicameral has stated that they want to encourage people to learn and try firearms, and so gun ranges are supported in the perspective of you can try multiple ones. And typically, if you go to a good gun range, there's a ton of people there who are more than happy to help you find the right one, because it's really part of the sales process, right? Good customer service. I suggest that you get comfortable and take a basic class to understand how a firearm works, how do you manipulate it safely, how you can handle malfunctions. And you need that foundation so that when you take a concealed handgun class, you can really focus on the law and legal aspects of the course rather than the basic handgun portion, because it's already nerve-wracking when you're taking a class where there's a test and then a range qualification to be trying to learn how to handle your gun or load a magazine while you're trying to take your CHP. The concealed handgun permit class is great. Our state of Nebraska statutes require a ton of information about federal and state law with regards to self-defense. and use of force, and helps you understand that the best goal is to avoid the fight in the first place. That's the only guaranteed way you can win any fight, is just not getting into one at all. But at the same time, to know that use of force is a spectrum, right? And so from a legal perspective, it is absolutely fine for you to use force to protect yourself, but it should be equal force, right? So if you and I decided to get into an argument and get into fisticuffs, right? Well, you and me might be equal in our physical force against each other. And we might get in trouble, obviously, for disturbing the peace and things like that. But the last thing that would be legal was for me to bring something else that elevates my use of force against you that wouldn't be equal. Right. And so what I really appreciate is good courses that help people feel comfortable with understanding the decision-making process that's involved with your handgun. So I don't go anywhere armed that I wouldn't go unarmed. Right. So I don't put myself in situations that are of increased risk. I also learned how to de-escalate situations. And I always like to share in my classes, an armed society is a polite society. And a lot of people think that means we're all armed, so we're all just super polite to each other. I mean it more from a personal perspective. And so when I engage with someone on the highway who cuts me off, in the past, before I learned all this, I might give that one finger wave, you know, hey, you're a bad driver. Now I'm just, hi, go ahead, cut me off. I stay polite, I stay calm, cool, and collected, because I have a greater responsibility to myself to keep myself safe and not create a situation where self-defense is a need.
And I think that that's also very important too, because it's like when you do take, now that you have gone and got this education, you know more about it. Now you have to hold yourself to a higher standard because you went and did that. So you have to be able to set the example. And I really like what you said about, I wouldn't put myself in a situation regardless if I had the gun or if I didn't. You know, you don't want to go out, we're not telling you to go out and get a gun and be like, okay, well now that I have a gun, I'm going to go to this place, blah, blah, blah. And if somebody tries me, I'm going to be ready.
Say hello to my little friend.
No, it's not that. It's like you said, you know, you're still living the same life that you would. You don't put yourself in situations to be able to use your gun. It's all about self-defense and being able to protect yourself if that need be. You know, you always want to go to other resources first. So how do you typically go about something if you do have a conflict? What is I know in your course you talked about what kind of things you would say if someone made you feel uncomfortable. Have you ever been in an instance where you had to use your gun or had to pull it out for any reason?
So I have had what we call a defensive use of firearm situation occur in my life. There were no shots fired, but it was definitely a scary moment. It was one of those times where you find yourself, you have to get gas. It's in the middle of the night.
It's always those gas stations.
It's always those gas stations. I was on a long trip with my daughter in the car, who was fast asleep. Exited the highway, found a gas station right there. It was really, really well lit, but it was at 2 a.m. So the store part was closed. There was no lighting anywhere near except for that gas station. So using my training, I knew to pull it around in a certain way so that I have a good 180-degree view of where I call the dark part of the area, and made a plan before I exited my vehicle about the what ifs. So what ifs are not living with paranoia. What ifs are, in the event of X, what am I going to do next? Having done that so many times, it's a very quick process that I have, but basically I made a plan to exit the vehicle, to put the gas into the tank to start the gas, but have my back to my car so that I can scan. In the event I see a threat, what am I going to do? So all those what ifs are happening in a matter of moments, right? So I proceed to do that, execute my plan. And about 200 yards away, there is a small motel next to this gas station. And it's dark, it's not well lit. You know, it's literally the Scary Movie kind of landscape. And I see two heads pop up from between two cars. And only because I was scanning had I noticed this potential issue, right? So I'm going from condition yellow, which is basically happy self-awareness and awareness of my arena of where I'm at, to orange. This has the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I don't, why are they out, at 2 a.m. or whatever. But I continue to proceed to fill up my gas tank. And as I'm in orange, I'm watching them, and my plans of action are changing, right? So now it's what if with them in the mix. So basically I had a plan for if they stayed there. I had a plan if they walked away. I had a plan if they ventured in my general direction but not at me. I had all these different plans. Well, they went to maybe plan D, which was begin to approach me, right? So there I am, 2 a.m., all by myself. 2 gentlemen, can't see them in the dark.
Wow.
Trying to get gas. They're still far enough away. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead and leave, right? Well, at that moment of the decision is when they started jogging towards me. So now I have the situation where I have this gas thing in my car, I have my keys, and I have my firearm, and I have 2 people coming. So I grabbed the gas thing, I dropped it, and I immediately go to verbal commands. Hey, you, stay back. Stay back, can't help you. Can't help you, stay back. Right, because I don't know, are they coming here for my help? But at the same time, I'm by myself with my daughter, and I'm sorry, I can't help you. Well, that just makes them run faster. So I have a decision to make about whether can I get into my car and drive away, or do I stand there, right? Can I safely retreat? Knowing myself, I cannot get my car keys into my car when it's raining. It's that fumbling thing. And so I move from the gas and I bring my firearm out to low ready. As I continue to give commands, they keep coming and speed up. So at that moment, in those seconds, as they were continuing to approach, I felt completely threatened. There was no reason for these 2 men to come running and then keep speeding while I'm giving commands, and so I draw my firearm up. And at that moment is when they realized that I was armed. That's what I'm thinking. And in a split second, they stopped and ran away. So there I am with my firearm out. A tremendous amount of adrenaline. I don't know if I was breathing or if my heart was beating. It was very terrifying. So I get into my vehicle and I drive away. I call 911. I want to alert them that I felt threatened, that I was possibly under attack, and that I was a concealed handgun, permit holder, and that I'd be willing to give a statement and what have you, where I was driving. So I drove home. There was no follow-up to that incident, but it was a scary moment because I knew I couldn't get away, and that all I had between them and me and my daughter was my firearm. And I tried to use a level of force to inform them that I'm not going to be a victim today. Whether they saw that or not, I don't know. But it was probably one of the scariest moments of my life. And had I not had my firearm, I'd hate to imagine what would have happened.
And that is so huge, because I think that a lot of women, one of their biggest fears is being a victim of kidnapping, sex trafficking, rape. All those things are extremely real and extremely prevalent, and it's still happening. And I do think, like you said, in that situation, if you had not had your firearm, who knows what would have happened, So I think that's why it is, once again, so important for us to be educated and for us to have the things to be able to protect ourselves, because you may not always have someone with you, or you might not always have that man figure, or that says that stay away. Are there and I also want to touch again on everything that she said, even leading up to that event. She knew that she was pulling up to a gas station, that it was at 2 a.m, and it might have been a little bit sketchy anyways. And so when she got out of her car, she was checking her surroundings. She made sure that she pulled her car around so that it would have been an easy escape. So once again, these things are things that she's doing before she ever even got to the event that it happened. And even with pulling her car around and doing all those things, she still was not able to safely get away with protecting herself, trying to prevent it. And, last result happened, and she had to pull it out, and she thankfully did not have to use it. And then after that, she ended up calling 911 and letting them know, what had happened. So just that is a full circle of how to handle an event like that. Are there, I want to touch again on the different licenses when we talk about being able to carry and have it concealed on us. What is the difference between having a purchaser's permit and a concealed carry, right? Because if a person goes and they buy a gun, how, I remember when I first bought my gun, I was like, okay, I have a purchase permit, but am I able to even transfer this from the place to my house without getting pulled over, getting in trouble, and taken away?
Sure.
So can we talk about those kind of things?
So in the state of Nebraska, it's actually far easier than you imagine, except for Omaha. So in Omaha, if you live in Omaha city limits, and you purchase a gun here from Omaha Gun Club, or any of the other ranges that sell, and you only have a purchase permit, you can't take the gun with you at first. They're going to hold it. You're going to take these forms to the Omaha police station, and you're going to register your handgun, because in the city limits of Omaha, all handguns must be registered with the police, unless you have a concealed handgun permit. So in Nebraska, we don't have what is called state preemption. And state preemption is a type of state law that basically relegates the ability to restrict firearms to the state level only. So here in Nebraska, Omaha can pass all sorts of different ordinances. Lincoln can pass all sorts of different ordinances. And it makes it very difficult for someone who's like, I want to be law abiding. What are all the laws that I have to comply with? So your purchase permit simply allows you to buy it. Here in Omaha, you have to register it. But if you weren't an Omaha resident and you wanted to bring your gun into Omaha, the way the ordinance reads you still have to have it registered, unless you get a concealed handgun permit. So the concealed handgun permit not only provides you then the opportunity to carry concealed, but it also gives you what we call state preemption rights, in the sense that you only need to worry about the state laws with regards to transportation, possession, and having it on you. So yeah, I can understand how that would be really daunting.
So someone who has the purchase permit, where are they legally able to carry, both within city regulations and then also the state? So if I have my purchase permit, am I only able to have it at home? What is the difference between open carry and concealed carry?
Great question. So in the state of Nebraska, our Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, Google it, it's an awesome piece of writing, really asserts the right to open carry. But there actually isn't a law about open carry in the state of Nebraska, which is why you can. So our state constitution doesn't give rights, it prevents or protects. So open carry is perfectly permissible in the entire state of Nebraska, with the exception of Omaha. Omaha requires you to have either an open carry permit or your concealed handgun permit in order to open carry. When concealed handgun permits became a thing, the open carry permit in Omaha pretty much went away, where you'd go to a class and get an open carry permit in order to carry it outside and on your body in a visible way. So now they just acknowledge the concealed handgun permit as the same permitting vehicle to carry open. But I can carry open anywhere else in the state of Nebraska without a purchase permit. So the purchase permit is just to buy, right? So say you are married and your husband has a nice collection of handguns and you decide you want to open carry, go open carry. As long as you're 21 and not prohibited, you're good to go in the state of Nebraska.
So you don't need so like you said, if my husband or if someone, if he had guns and I didn't have any prior reason to be able to say, okay, you cannot have guns on you, then I don't need a purchase permit and I don't need a concealed carry.
Not if you're open carry.
Okay. Okay, and what is the difference between open carry and concealed carry?
So open carry means that some portion of the firearm is visible. Okay. And so when you think about the ways that different people carry in holsters, some have what are called outside the waistband. So it's a holster that sits usually connected to your belt in some fashion, like on your hip or towards the front or even in your back, where someone's looking at you could see the gun. That's open carry. Concealed carry is simply having the firearm covered where no parts of the gun are visible. So if I were open carrying and decided to put a coat on, and my coat covered the gun where it wasn't visible, now I'm concealed carrying. So it's really important when you choose to open carry that you do so in wearing clothing that doesn't accidentally maybe come untucked and cover your gun, especially if you don't have a concealed handgun permit, because that's against the law. But if you're concealed carrying, say you're outside the waistband and you have a coat, and you take your coat off, and now you're open carrying, it's no big deal.
Is someone, say I am a friend of yours, and you don't have any priors, you have no reason to not be able to, can I hand you a gun to be able for you to carry it around as long as you're 21 years of age?
Right, so we do have limitations on what we call transfers, temporary transfers. So if you and I are here at the range and you want to borrow some of my firearms while we're on the range and I'm watching you, there's no problem, even though we're not related. But under state law, you have to be what we call first degree of a family connection to allow someone to have your firearm.
Okay.
Without a purchase permit. So like I can let my father, my mother, my son, my daughter, my grandma have access to my firearms if I'm not with them. But other than that, if we go out shooting on my farm or on the range, I can let someone borrow. But I can't just like, here buddy, you can have my gun for the day, go conceal carry or go open carry all you want, without verifying that person has a purchase permit or a concealed handgun.
Right, and so basically the reason then, kind of within its own definition, the concealed carry, to get to the reason for having that is so that you can have your gun on you kind of hidden.
Correct.
But you are still legally able to carry your gun on you as long as it's open and out, you don't have priors, and you're over the age of 21.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does it work in cars, for example? What are because the cars are a little tricky situation, especially when there's more than one person in the car.
Very important. So let's talk about cars in general. So we'll exclude Omaha because Omaha has some ordinances on open carrying, period, right? So open means open. So that means that that firearm is immediately visible from, say, the law enforcement's perspective. And so you wouldn't be able to have it in your console or your glove compartment. It would have to be out in the open. So some folks that I know who decide to take their firearm off their hip while they're driving might lay it on their passenger seat, right? Because it's visible. When law enforcement comes looks through this window or this window, it's visible right there. You've seen maybe gun racks on the back of trucks, right? Well, that's, maybe you could have a pistol rack, if you will, if you wanted to do that. The challenge being that just makes it really easy for your firearms to be stolen, right?
Yeah.
It's horrible that we have to worry about that because we shouldn't victimize the victim for having the firearm stolen, but at the same time, we got to be judicious in our approach of common sense storage. But yeah, as you're traveling across the state in Nebraska and you're a Nebraska resident, no problem. Now, when we get into interstate, right? So I'm traveling from Nebraska across America, that's a whole nother kickaboo. So if you have a concealed handgun permit and you have reciprocity, which means another state recognizes our Nebraska permit, you can carry concealed in those states as well. So like if I want to travel to Iowa or South Dakota, no big deal, I can cross the border, no issue. If I don't have a concealed handgun permit, then federal law does offer me some protection and a means for transporting my firearms from one state to the next, as long as I'm legal in the state I'm leaving and I'm legal in the state I'm going to. However, I have to take all the ammunition out of the firearm and store it separately, and the firearm has to be in a case, in a trunk, or locked in the rear of the vehicle where it's not accessible. Those are federal transportation laws.
So what kind of, are there any federal laws that are kind of just the same all around for guns? Any basic or general laws at all?
Well, there's a ton. I mean, we could, that's a whole another class. But in general, the federal transportation laws are the ones that we're most concerned about because that's the ones that affect most of our citizens. There's obviously laws that prevent people from having armor piercing or illegal ammunition. At the federal level, there's federal laws with regards to making a firearm accessible to a juvenile. That's a felony. It might be a misdemeanor for the juvenile to have access for themselves, but providing a firearm to a juvenile under 18. Unless you're the guardian, they're under a class. They're part of like ROTC or some form of school training. There's some exceptions that allow for folks under 18 to have access. But the federal laws are mostly about trying to control access to folks who can't or shouldn't have access, which are juveniles and prohibited people.
Okay. What about, so say we're not traveling through car, are you able to take guns on a plane? Are people able to travel
Yes, you
flights?
are. It's fun, I'll tell you that. The biggest thing is if you're going to have travel to another state and you want to bring your firearm, number one, you're going to want to look at the TSA website for the federal regulations for TSA. Then you're also going to want to look at the carrier. So if you're flying Delta, American, or Southwest, do they have any unique processes you have to comply with? And also knowing where you're going and what that state is like. So for instance, like when I traveled to Arizona for some training, going to the Omaha airport was super easy. I had my gun in its case. I had my ammunition stored separately. I went to the check-in counter and I said, "Hi, I'm declaring a firearm." And the check-in person said, "Okay, let me see it." So I took my case out of my suitcase, set it up on the counter. We opened it. That person verified it was unloaded and that there's no ammunition. She had me fill out some paperwork. We locked the case back up, put the paperwork on to the case, and I put it back in my checked baggage. And then I sent it in like normal. The interesting thing was, though, when I got to Arizona, I just picked up my baggage and I went to my training class. On the way back through Arizona, declaring your firearm was different. I had to go to a special location. They had to open up my case and check my firearm. They checked for residue, which is hilarious because there's gunpowder on my gun and in the case, but they did that, and then they locked it, and then they took my bag and they took care of it. So, for instance, one of the warnings I love to give people is, say for instance you were flying from here to Maine or somewhere on the East Coast with your firearm. If you stop in New York or New Jersey, do not touch your luggage. So for instance, like say there's a snowstorm and you stay overnight. Right. A lot of us go get our luggage so that we have our toothbrush and so forth and so on. The moment you touch your baggage with the gun in it, you have broken New York or New Jersey law. You will get arrested.
Wow.
Yeah, because there's a ton of restrictions on firearm ownership in those states. So even though you're doing interstate travel, going from one place where you're legal to another, sometimes you get stuck in places you're not.
Yeah.
So you got to be very mindful. So there's some great apps that you can look up on your phone, like Legal Heat, and USCCA has some where, I'm traveling to XY city or state. What are the firearm laws there that I need to be aware of, which will really be helpful.
Yeah, I think that there's so many, there are so many different regulations and rules within states, within cities. So once again, it goes back to being educated and knowing where you're going, and knowing what you can do or what you can and can't use with it. So yeah, how has the COVID been with guns? What has that been like?
2020. Okay, so
2020,
as you know, is a COVID year. 2020 is an election year. And we're not going to get into politics. But generally speaking, election years are usually what we call good years for the firearms industry. So individuals who are concerned about which party or which person is going to get elected at the state and or federal level generates an interest in, maybe I should buy some firearms because maybe those firearms wouldn't be available later. Well, then COVID happened. And COVID is a historical thing that we are all living through. When we think about things that have happened in our history, this is in a moment of time where we're going to tell our grandkids, back in the day, COVID, I had to walk up the hill twice with my mask on. All right, so COVID is this pandemic where in the beginning there was so much unknown. Like, I remember in March, like, is this the end of the world? Like, do I need to go buy some food? And we ran out of toilet paper.
Oh my gosh, everything was gone.
Anytime you place fear, right? And there's an awakening. So I don't call it fear in the sense of I'm putting it down. I'm calling it an awakening. So when you realize that we as people are dependent on systems that involve other people, that if they're afraid and we're afraid and they stop doing their jobs and we aren't able to do our jobs, then really what is the structure and organization of society, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all these things that we take for granted, like hospitals, law enforcement, ambulances, grocery stores, all these things that are part of our routine. When we as a group, and it happened nationwide, go, wow, none of these are permanent. These could all fall apart depending on how this pandemic grows, was an awakening. And so people were saying to themselves, we need to be prepared. And their version of preparedness ran the gamut. So we had the toilets, toilet paper thing going on, we had the food thing, and then people were looking at, well, what happens if the things that keep us safe as a society break down as well? Well, how am I going to protect myself? How are we going to fight crime if crime becomes just prevalent everywhere? Well, that has created an incredible surge in what we call new firearm ownership. So individuals who had never in their life thought that they would own a gun thought, you know what? I want to have this just in case. Mm-hmm. And so from March through now, trying to keep firearms in stock, trying to keep ammunition in stock is just incredibly daunting, because we have millions of Americans for the first time going out and buying handguns or shotguns or rifles, primarily for self-defense. I've spent hours in the last, since March, training new people. So before I would have like a Thursday night, I'd have 3 clients every Thursday, and that was the routine. Now I'm holding these sessions 4 or 5 times a week.
Wow.
For 3 and 4 people at a time, who have never handled firearms. I'm helping them select firearms, finding the right fit for them, for the right purpose, helping educate them on safe storage and how to be effective in your marksmanship and safe on the range, and how to train without ammunition. So that's an interesting thing that's been a huge need, is how do I build up my skills if I can't shoot? Mm-hmm. So if I need to hold this target ammunition and this defensive ammunition and I need to keep it because that's all I have available, what can I do to further my gun handling? And so I've created a whole new routine about how to train at home in a safe way with your firearm, with everything up to the point where you'd fire. And that's about 70-75% of really the skill set. And so what I have found is people are coming to a class, they shoot a bit, they come back about a month later, they haven't shot yet, their marksmanship has improved because they're doing all this stuff at home.
Wow.
And it's really quite remarkable, and it makes me proud to see how well they're doing. Folks who thought I would never be able to hit the side of the barn are coming in, and their targets are nice groupings and at pretty good distances, and it's a really rewarding feeling.
So I want to talk about like the COVID and everything that happened. I remember when I was here and I was kind of starting my journey as well, like, I think I want to, I think it's time. And they told me about a woman named Trish. And they were like, Trish is a badass. She's the one that you need to meet. I remember they said something about how there was some type of halt on people who could purchase guns at a time like that in the city of Omaha. So can you talk a little bit about what happened and what you did, and for us to be like...
There were a couple different things that happened. So with COVID, all of a sudden we started losing our ability to interact with our government. So they were closing down offices and police stations, and you couldn't walk in and those kinds of things. Well, part of that included Omaha had decided they weren't going to do any gun registrations because of COVID. They didn't want to expose their staff to people, and that was another way to reduce that risk. Well, the Constitution, the Second Amendment, which doesn't give us our rights, it protects our rights, and that's a really good distinction. Mm-hmm. Then you look at the state of Nebraska's Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, Google it. That is such, to me, an abhorrent policy, to say, all the people in Omaha, sorry, none of you get to buy any because you can't register it. Mm-hmm. So it's in de facto basically saying we're eliminating your right to be a self-defender. And I'm involved in the political side as well. So the Well Armed Women is a nonprofit, 501c3, so we don't get involved in politics. But having joined the firearm community, I realized how important it is for us to speak our minds and represent ourselves. So I also belong to the Nebraska Firearm Owners Association, which is a grassroots Nebraska member-based organization that seeks to educate elected officials, get good legislation passed, and stop bad legislation from passing. And so I had some connections. And as soon as I found out that individuals were not going to be able to exercise their rights, it took a couple phone calls. And within minutes, all of a sudden there was a new policy posted on Omaha Police Department's Facebook page about how they would be able to handle registrations in a way that was keeping them safe, reducing COVID exposure, but still allowing people to have their rights. Out on the western side of the state, there were 2 different counties whose sheriffs decided they were closing shop, and thus they weren't going to give permit to purchase. So you couldn't get a purchase certificate at all. When all these folks in those counties were like, I need to buy my first gun, they couldn't even get one.
Wow.
Right? So I contacted the senator, representative for those counties, and amazingly, they had suffered for 4 months before I had found out about it. And in about half an hour, there was a new post on the sheriff's Facebook page about their process, because there were already different counties already doing it in a safe way, and they could have adopted it. But it's really important to stay informed and stand up for your rights, right? Asserting your rights, exercising your rights are important, and making it known that you're a gun owner. So that's the thing that's really interesting is my first day as a lobbyist, I ran into a senator. I was dressed up in a suit, and I was going to lobby for a really simple law. I wanted standard signage for concealed permit holders to know that this personal property was a prohibited place. We don't have standard signage in Nebraska. So as I'm kind of mulling around and waiting to testify, the senator's like, oh, so why are you here today? And I said, well, I'm here to testify on behalf of the standard signage law for gun owners. And he looked at me and he goes, you don't look like a gun owner. And I said, well, what do we look like? Right? There are stereotypes.
Yeah.
We have them in any community. But I really hate stereotypes. I think when I look at the firearms community being part of it, we have every single creed and color, background, political persuasion, identity that you could think of, because it's a human right. It's a human right. It's not part of one group or another. It's a human right. And so I laughed. I said, well, we all look different, sir. We all look different.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for being an activist, for helping so many women out, for being such a role model, because this is what badass women look like. It is an honor to be able to, just be in your presence and receive this knowledge directly and firsthand. I would love to be able to see some of your shooting skills and be able to show, a proper technique and just a few key points on that.
Sure.
So let's switch it up. go down, or like the anticipation. So it's just a matter of working on it, practicing, you know, getting better, getting more comfortable with the gun and everything like that. But it's really nice to have an instructor here with you, telling you what to do and what not to do. So yeah, and as you can see,